There we go. Morning, everybody. Welcome to Red Morning. Special guest today. If you guys don't know, I'd say it's Rule Zero Dad. If you guys don't know him, I'll give a brief intro, but I kind of want you to explain your story as much as you're comfortable with, too. When I first started this, back when I was still a little tadpole, he was kind of on the same graduating class of me, I guess is the way I should put it there. So he and I have been in this in a long time together, and I would consider him like a really good friend as far as this stuff goes. How's it going, Zero?
I'm doing good. I guess for ease of conversation, you can call me Corey. I don't care. I understand that my nom de plume for this space doesn't necessarily flow off the tongue, so Corey's good for discussions today.
All right, Corey, it is. So, Corey, I guess our topics we were going over today was the male action plan, the law, and then assertiveness. The thing I love the most is we were talking about this a little bit offline, how you actually have the old version of Advocacy's book.
Yeah, I do, and there's a reason for that. If you haven't been,
I'll bet.
yeah, if you haven't been following, the trials and tribulations of Mr. K through the years. He used to have a really, really good blog called Married Man's Sex Life, and then he wrote a book about his experiences called the Married Man's Sex Life Primer. And then his wife and a bunch of ladies started taking over, and it caused a lot of problems with the message that he was trying to put forth. And as often happens with male oriented spaces, if you get too many women trying to soften the message or make it more palatable for the masses, it loses focus and it becomes a what do we need to do to please the ladies message, as opposed to what do I need to do as a man in order to make myself complete and a happy individual. And so I own the 2011 version of the Married Man Sex Life Primer, where they still have a section called the MAP, the Male Action Plan. Later on, later versions changed the name to a Mindful Action Plan, which sounds really gay.
Didn't they change it after that too to mindful attraction plan?
Yes, they did. So essentially, they went from you, dude, do something. Here's an actionable way to go about it. To, well, it might be nice for you to think about these things, and if you do, you may become more attractive. And here's some ways you might become more attractive. Well, I mean, the medium is the message, and the moment that you start putting words like mindful and attractive, when what you're trying to do is continue to have hot, nasty sex with your wife, into your old stuff and water it down, and then start having women answer questions about your problems, you may lose your message, and your popularity of your site might go downhill. And from what I saw, there is no more um, blog. The For the most part, his presence, Mr. K's presence, has been lost to the world, but for his older writings. And that's why I like to work from what worked and what held more sway with men, and that's his old stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody has their thing. Roosh did daybang before he found Jesus, so I guess I understand it. Here's the thing that's kind of funny though. So that kind of happened right around the time we were first started on the married red pill. If I got the times right, I think so, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was in and out early, 2015s, late 2015s, early 2016s, and went from there essentially. So
Yeah, I remember there was a couple guys that ended up coming over from there, and they were really just not happy about. They get on there, and it was the exact same problem they had just to begin with, is that their wife would constantly berate them, and then they ended up coming online to try and learn how to be better, and they just get berated by a stranger instead. I always kind of found that funny. My online nagging wife.
well, yeah, Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in a forum and then all of a sudden have Jennifer telling me what to do, and if anybody doesn't know, Jennifer is Ethel's wife, who plays a prominent part in his writings, and we know more about Jennifer's predilections and anatomy from Mr. K's writings than maybe a lot of us should. But I hope that she's happy with everything that's happened to this point.
Oh, I hope so. I heard he's had a heart attack now, so I'm hoping he gets better anyway.
Yeah.
Because those guys, they were the old guard. There was they called them the old married guys. There was him, there was Ian Ironwood, and there's one more guy. Why can I not remember him off the top of my head right now?
Arch Winger too, who was out there.
That's right, Arch Winger. He's got to be one of my favorite guys. I really don't know what happened to him, but I hope it's well, because he just kind of fell off the map, no reason, just one day just stopped writing.
Yeah, and a lot of people venerate Jack Ten of Hearts too, who was a pretty prolific writer in the space as well.
That is the most generous interpretation I've ever heard of his writing.
Well, we try to focus on the positives here, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, I remember that too, because there was a while there where I'm like, you know what, he's written all. I guess the audience doesn't really know what the hell we're talking about. So back when we were both new, there was this other guy, Jack Ten of Hearts. At the time, I went by my old handle, Stone Pimple Pilots. It was just Stone Temple Pilots and a play on words there.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, were you still Rule Zero Dad then, or were you something else?
No, I was, for a while, I was Caveat Emptor Lex. So I did a play on buyer beware the law type of thing, because of all the guys who were talking about getting divorce rate.
Oh, yeah. But I remember that because he always used to have like 3,000 word dissertations. Every guy who came in with the most simple problem, and he would always do this great breakdown, and then the guy would just delete his count and leave. And he wrote, I think I did a count because I copied everything down because I wanted to read it all like as a piece of work. It was about 300,000 words. So it's not a small book. And I realized that even though he got the impression of being very profound in that, he would really nail, there were 6 archetypes that he would always describe in all of his stories. And he was very good at explaining them. But then I realized, you're just telling the same 6 stories 100 different ways. And that's when we got into our little beef, where he, like me, whine more please, and against him would be like, we're going to tell the guy the basic stuff. If you can't work out and brush your teeth and wash your ass, then we're wasting our time with the rest of us. And I don't think he agreed with that.
No, I mean, I think his style was very prescriptive. He wanted to diagnose you as a problem and then give you a very specific, detailed answer as to you. Not good for heuristics, but very good for individual actionable advice. But when you're in a forum with 12,000 people at the time, and you're writing an answer to, Chester the Molester, throw away 467. And he makes the decision to simply delete his account after getting, 2.5 hours of $500 an hour, analytical advice. That does become tiresome after a while, because what you want is some continuity with whatever notes are being traded. And, if this guy has a specific example and somebody puts in the time to write to that person, well then, what happens when the post is gone and the advice remains, or what do you do with that? And I think a lot of times it was just easier to call somebody a bundle of sticks and have them try and defend their positions, and then turn it into a dialectic type of situation where, you're having things hashed out one issue at a time, as opposed to, having one person write this tome on, why Sandy won't, give me rim jobs anymore. So, you just need to sometimes hear the basics in a hurtful way, as opposed to, getting, Dr. Jack Ten to write this very long, drawn out thing for you.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I think you have to kind of be mean. Like, I know what my first post there, I got ripped into. I got called everything under the sun. But I don't think, unless they do that, I don't think it's going to work. Because guys are too used to being, I don't even want to say coddled. I think it's accurate to say quietly let fail. Do you know where I'm going with that one?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to put some basic advice out there and have them either take the initiative or not to do those things in order to become more attractive, or they simply won't. And then they can go to relationships or dead bedrooms and cry about being a victim as opposed to, taking control of their existence and, lifting a few weights, losing a few pounds, learning that, washing your ass is important, things like that. But the
I'm sorry, I
problem,
can just think of the exact post you're talking about too.
yeah, yeah, I just, I get to the point sometimes where, I don't want to end up being, certain people with this stuff where I point to things that have already been written by somebody else and just say, here, read this. But at the same time, um, guys really aren't that different when it boils down to it. When you
Yeah,
boil
no.
it down, we share a lot of similarities in how we got to the points that we're at in most cases. Unless you've been, dropped from space or came from a different culture, we've all kind of um, crawled around on the ground and came to the same place at whatever speed that might be.
Yeah, well, I always laugh about that because every now and then it'll be you or me or one of the other like senior guys, and this guy will come in with this problem, and he'll be very scant on details because guys never give details; they just assume you know what their grievances are. And then you go, okay, so let me guess, you got A, B, and C happening right now. She did this, she did that, and you responded this way, and you're like, try this, and then you'll see how that works. And like, oh my god, you guys are like amazing. It's like, no, no, we've just seen 100 different guys have the exact same story, and this is what they did, and here's how 80 of them failed, and here's how the 20% of them passed. That's all it is. It's just repetition.
Yeah,
You're right. We're just
it is a lot. It is a lot of reps. It is a lot of experience and seeing patterns. I mean, we do a lot of pattern recognition when it comes to diagnosing what's wrong with people, and how we always use the certain heuristics like all women have a tendency to behave a certain way. Men aren't any different. Dudes have a general tendency to behave the same way as well. And what you end up with a lot of times is just a guy who has been thrown off guard by the fact that behaving the same way for the past decade doesn't produce the same results today as it did back then. And, people grow and change, and they also, um, if they don't keep themselves up to date in anything, they're going to fall behind. And, you can't be the high school quarterback all your life. It's just not going to work that way.
well, that's what I was gonna say because weren't you were basically Chad, were you not?
Well, I wasn't Chad per se, but I was very socially aware. I was a college athlete. I've always been, what would be considered, classically symmetrical and good looking. Um, I'm not particularly tall. I'm only 5'10", but that never really mattered much. I played college sports. I know some pretty interesting athletes from that. Um, and then I went to law school, passed the bar on the first attempt. I've got a lot of things going for me, on paper as far as potentialities were concerned back then, and bona fides now that are generally very attractive to most women. But
Mm-hmm.
you get sick, you get fat, you lose focus on yourself, and all that stuff can kind of slip away at a point. So, I mean, anybody can backslide into either comfort or even things out of their control, but they have to understand that being attractive and not behaving unattractively are key elements to keeping relationships alive, and also to begin new relationships. People just aren't going to gravitate to you because your mom likes you. You need to be fuckable. You need to be a person that adds value to whatever situation you come into. Then
Yeah.
that's not just a male female thing either. That's a professional thing as well. I mean, we operate very much on a "what have you done for me lately" type of scenario, and if you can't bring something to the table, whether it be in the bedroom, in the boardroom, in your kids' room,
Yeah. What's the point?
you're failing, man. You're not doing the job. You're basically another one, either going to be viewed as another one of the children in the house, or a check. And you don't want to be the check. You don't want to be the ATM. You don't want to be the oldest son. It's not a fun place to be.
Well, it's funny because actually I never admitted this to anybody. When I first did my speech at 21 convention, did you know you were kind of my inspiration for it?
No, I had always thought that maybe our friend Ellis, Frenchie, might have had a lot of that to do with that.
He had a lot to do. I really liked him, and I miss Ellis there. But no, it was you and S Curve.
Oh yeah.
Because I was doing the archetypes, and because everybody thinks, because there's that idea that, like you said, as long as you're Chad, life is easy and you could just coast. And then I go, it's not really the case, because like I've seen guys who were Chad, and I know it's not a fair assessment, but they do coast. But then they find something happens, and you can't really be aloof your whole life. And I think I used the term has-beens and never were.
Yeah.
Because your story, like you said, where you top of the world, you worked hard, you played hard, you had everything going for you. And I kind of had that to some extent, not nearly as much as you, which is, I'm fine with that. And then hardship happened, and you weren't really prepared to deal with that, because that was kind of a hardship that was fairly unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, it's the smart guy finally fails problem. I mean, we've had these discussions amongst ourselves. Sometimes you just aren't unprepared to lose because you haven't become less fragile yet. You haven't had an opportunity to be broken or to take some hits. And once you finally do, your ability to react to it a lot of times is
stunted,
is non-existent, because you just simply don't come from that place a lot of times. And I myself, was one of those people where I didn't, other than my early childhood, I didn't really face any difficulties until I was in my mid to late 20s, early 30s, in any type of situations, and that's a hard position for a lot of people to accept. But I think the never-beens, though, are the people who have either never taken a chance or have never given themselves an opportunity. They're in the same boat, but they have essentially decided to take their ball and go home, or shine that turd up really nicely and never show it to anybody.
Yeah.
And, when you do that. So.
Yeah, and then both guys end up in the same spot. Granted, the has-beens, they tend to be better because they know what life can be like, so they tend to be a little easier to nudge in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah.
Because that was the one thing with Scurv. Although Scurv, I liked him because he just caught on instantly, because his was kind of similar. He's a very smart guy, but he was shorter. He had a sickness to him, and he worked really hard. And then I think wasn't it the betas and weight, or whatever Rollo's article is, where they talk about how you work hard, and then at the end of the day you get the princess, and that's what he got. But she is essentially treating him as like a paycheck.
Yes, I think that would be an excellent assessment of him, only from the perspective that he, shorter guy, immigrant, has definitive disabilities based on just either birth defects or something genetic.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes a successful doctor. Girl marries him. He doesn't like her after a while, and he's trying to figure out what to do with her. It's essentially what ended up happening. And let's see. I need to turn up my volume, I guess, on my mic. Let me look and see what's going on with that.
All right. That's right. I'll run my mouth for a bit here too. Yeah, and I loved it, because at the end of the day, you got everybody's thinking that if you just need to be the best, top of the tier man, they always use that term alpha male like a noun, or you can be the sad doormat kind of guy. And they always think that the one's going to be protected from the other. But I found, at least, I mean, obviously we're self-selecting, but you find that both guys end up converging in the same spot anyway. So at that point, it's clear that it's not about building up yourself to a proper archetype. It's about developing the proper tools and strategies in life to weather these things. And in your case, it was awesome. Like I said, you got your act together. And as far as I can remember, your wife basically straightened up and started acting, right? Scurvs was a bit different. She always wanted the floor mat. And so once he became self-actualized in that, he's like, you know what? I don't need this. And he just moved on. State plan is the same as the go plan, as we say, isn't it?
Yeah. He also has a desire to go ahead. He also has a desire to have children, and I think that she had a physical issue that prevented that completely. So that really added to that as well.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah, she ended up having some either type of cancer or debilitating uterine issue that prevented her from having kids. So that kind of clinched it for him, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then, so that was the thing I found that was awesome about that. So there's those two stories. And then there's Frenchie. And I love Frenchie because he had the most unique one there out of all the guys. He essentially got his unicorn. They lived a long and happy life. And then she died. I can't remember if it was cancer or what, but he actually was living that tradcon life that everybody wanted to. And then she passed away. And now he's like, okay, so now what? I made the girl the center of my universe. And we worked together. We built perfection. And the kids are out of the house. And now I'm on my own. So it was nice because he gave me a lot more positivity about a lot of this stuff than I think I deserved. But at the same time, I enjoyed that I taught him how to enjoy a good hate fuck, which really helps. I remember his problem was, no girl could ever measure up to his wife. And so I'm like, that's fine. Don't let her measure up, hate her a little bit. Then he got that artisanal bread baker lady.
Yeah. I don't necessarily know what happened there, but I'm still trying to improve my volume out here. Let's see does that help at all, anybody? Or am I still?
It should be fine.
Okay. All right.
Yes, guys, if you didn't know, James Spader is actually part of the Married Red Pill.
No.
We know some powerful people.
Yeah.
It was just because I was a huge fan of Stargate and I had to have it happen.
Yeah. No, my spirit animal is young James Spader. So I'm partial to his asshole characters from the early 80s.
I'm also loving hearing your Midwestern accent with the James Spader look there. I don't know why, but it entertains the hell out of me.
Yeah, I can't help where I was born, but that's that is what it is. Yeah.
I always like it. It can't be any worse than my Canadian accent. I'm kind of picking them up as I go. For a while there, I had like a bit of a Montreal Quebecois. I mean, I didn't like it.
Yeah. No, to be honest, I in many ways I do kind of look like him, but not exactly, obviously. Blonde.
Yeah, the blonde are a bit out of fashion.
Blue. Yeah, blonde, blue. No, I do not wear the white blazers anymore. That's kind of done. But yeah, no, we. Yeah, no, that's hilarious though. So what do you want to discuss when it comes to the map, Brian? I mean, you yourself like to produce these for people when asked, and I think that's a noble thing. But I understand that there's also some issues to deal with as far as letting guys do the work for themselves. So how do you balance those two?
Yeah, well, I treat it a lot like you would treat law. I don't actually prescribe anything. I start off with like a phone call, a consult. You ask the guy what he wants. You kind of ask the general questions like, give me your victim puke. Like, you got half an hour, complain about everything that's wrong with everything and the words that you use. And I'll have them speak it and then I'll have them write it down, because then you can usually see, and I think you've noticed this from field reports, where guys will write down their thing and you can usually tell like simple things, depending on how many she statements versus how many I statements are in there, whose frame he's living in.
Right.
Or you'll see details that he thought of that are as important, but aren't really important, or stuff that he omitted that should have been in there. So you know what he's ignoring or what his ego invested in ignoring. And then you go from there into, and I just do policy because, I mean, I did a lot of governance documentation with the military and with corporate. So what I would do is then you find out what the guy, you kind of distill what the guy wants out of the next year of his life if he waved a magic wand. And then you provide some action plans. In that case, it's just simple things like a workout regimen, books that he should be reading, which is a lot of it's on the Married Red Pill sidebar anyway. But at least then you're like, okay, so I know he wants to work on being less codependent. So he probably prioritize Manuel Smith and Robert Glover. Maybe he's getting divorced and he wants a plate. Then you would prioritize maybe like a Tom Torreo or Roosh above it so he can learn some game. And then beyond that, like you said, every guy, there's only maybe a couple, 6 different archetypes. So I'll bring up some old field reports and stories of guys who were doing similar things to him, saying, okay, well, if you go this way, then this is what's going to happen. This is what's likely going to happen. These are the obstacles you might encounter. And then they get to make those trade-offs. And that's the next topic, which is going to be awesome, where let's say a guy just wants to get laid. So then the obvious action there is, okay, go get a hooker then if your wife won't have sex with you right now. And he goes, oh, I don't want a hooker. All right, so what do you want? I want a girl to jump my bone. So what he wants is desire. So you go outside of the marriage and cheat. And he'll say, no, I don't want to do that either. And you're like, why? Well, because that's not fair to her. And like, then you establish that. And then you eventually drill down those. You ever heard like the 5 whys? I think it was Honda did that.
No, go fill me in on those.
Yeah, well, it's just 5 whys. So you ask why, and then for every answer the guy gives, you ask it again, why 5 times. And by the 5th why, you'll get to the core issue that somebody's actually talking about. And that's something I learned from Frenchie. There's always 2 reasons they want something. There's the reason that they tell you, and there's the reason they don't. And so at the end of the day, maybe you find out it's just the guy wants validation from his wife. And then you kind of know when he came in saying, I just want to get laid, what he actually wants is validation. And then you know how to attack that. You're like, okay, so you need to start removing and then you realize it's not a healthy goal for men to seek validation like that. And then you explain, okay, this is why it's a failure. Here's a bunch of people who have done it in the past. Here's what's happened. Here's some of the examples of things guys have done to shed their need for validation. And probably a year from now, you're going to find out maybe you had a covert contract that if you shed this need for validation, she's going to have sex with you. So when it doesn't happen, you're going to get frustrated. And it's just nice. I like it because it's something that we can't really do on a forum for free because it takes a certain level of investment. But giving that guy the confidence to know, like, as he does things, at least some certainty of what the outcome is going to be. Like, not a guarantee, and that's just like law, I would assume, like, because you did family law for a while, right?
No, I have purposely avoided family law for many reasons. My exposure to the tenets of family law came more when I was active in the MRA community in the early 90s.
Ooh, you were way back then there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was, with the writing speeches for the Promise Keepers and stuff like that back then. So, I mean, we had, close to 1 million people at some events. But, the same thing that destroys this particular group of guys over time came to blow that up as well. It's
letting chicks into the clubhouse, or?
Well, no, more than it. Well, that's always been attempted. I mean, you've seen it now with Paul Elam and a lot of these guys. They always try to get some lady to validate their points so that it's more palatable. Whether it's Cassie J or Christina Hoff Summers before that, Janice Fiamengo now,
Deads and Sushi.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. She's interesting, but I find her entertaining, but I have to either block or mute her in different time periods depending on what she's really writing about, only so that I can come back and say, okay, I know it's not me, it's you, and I just don't want to get. So, but
oh yeah, I agree. It's like talking to my older sister. Like after 3 days, I just want to strangle her. So I'm like, I'll be back in a couple days.
yeah, I mean the weird thing about you know the law area in particular when it comes to this space is that you have to understand that just like politics, all law is local,
Hmm.
and a lot of guys can make some generalizations about what um, the average person might experience in the event of child support issues or a divorce, but they can't be certain. And some people in the space were talking about putting together a compendium of all of the things that you need to look for when it comes to possibly getting a divorce, or how to insulate yourself from um, a bad outcome in the event of a divorce. What do I do to get more access to my kids? All of those issues.
I remember that. Yeah, and I knew it's kind of an impossible task, but that would be awesome if it could. But
It
you're right.
really,
It's jurisdiction to jurisdiction, judge to judge.
yeah.
It
I
can
mean,
change.
well, I mean, just between you and me, we would have, a national jurisdiction issue, a local jurisdiction issue. You would have probably even a, a, a city metropolitan area issue that would possibly be different from what I
Oh,
do.
it gets bigger than that too. If I still lived in Quebec, they don't even use common law; they use civil law.
Well,
So they
that's
have that Napoleonic law, which is a completely different ball of wax.
yeah, it's the old code system. Yeah, we actually have that in one of our states in the U.S. In Louisiana, has a codex within the state law system that kind of runs parallel to common law. So, like,
Hmm.
we're a common law, English law based country with that one weird enclave in their state law system, and I'm sure it's probably pretty similar to what Quebec experiences. But I mean, as a province, they should just vote to secede and be done with it. But
Yeah, don't even get me started on that. But
yeah.
here, for the audience, they may not know what the difference. Like, how would you describe the difference between common law and civil law?
Well, civil law, common law is law that's developed from precedent. Essentially, what happened when somebody got into a certain situation, and this is what another judge prior to this particular outcome decided based upon a set of facts. And what you have are general rules, and then you have interpretations by judges that lawyers and litigants kind of put their fact patterns against to kind of give some type of estimation as to what might happen. Code-based law is these are all of the things that you cannot do, and we will put it down in excruciating detail. And whatever your circumstances, we will basically use the code as a flow chart as to what your outcome is going to be. A judge is there not to necessarily interpret the law based on the facts and circumstances, but to apply the code to the circumstance. And that's kind of the difference that we have basically with rights too between North America and Europe, is that we have what are called negative rights here in the US, where the government is prevented from doing things to you. In other places, they have positive rights, all of the rights that the government grants to you, which is, that's very fungible. That can be taken away pretty quickly. But when the government says these are basically all the things that we can't do to you, and it's a very broad stroke, and
Right.
we might put in a couple of things here and there to restrict your behavior. I think that that's a better place to start from than these are all of the things that you are allowed to do. So that's the major difference between a code-based culture and a common law-based culture when it comes to law and its applicability.
Fair enough. But yeah, so then on that, I guess you're right. Like a compendium is obviously going to be completely. It's not a possible task. There's just too many variables, and if you ended up coming up with that book, it would be too big to be useful anyway.
Right. And
So I would almost find. What would you think of then as an idea of just getting guys to understand like a high level process? What are your aims? What are you looking to do? Because this is one thing I found with all my clients is that they basically walk into the lawyer's office and they just say, my wife wants a divorce. What do I do? and then the lawyer will tell them kind of very generic boilerplate stuff, but they don't. And I found the one thing I did that really helps them if they're going through one is to go to the lawyer with a plan in hand. What do you want to do? What do you want to have outcome from this? What do you want for custody, payments? Doesn't matter if it's unreasonable or not. Just ask them, like, look, I want to get to here. What steps can I take now to get there? And then usually when they've come back, it's been, okay, the lawyer said, for example, custody. I'll use one of my clients, one of my former clients there. He was in the military, and he finally got to the rank and level he wanted to. It was fairly high level, but he was getting divorced and he wanted to have custody of his kids. And so I asked him the hard question. Okay, so the law said, because he has a possibility of being deployed, that they can't give him full custody. That's just not happening. So you're going to have to make a choice then, and obviously a no judgment choice. Would you rather have full custody of your kid, or would you rather have this career you've worked your 15-year career to get towards? And he goes, you know what? I know. And he started to give that answer, where you always have to think about the kids and that. And I'm like, look, we're just talking privately. Don't bullshit me. Which one do you actually like? And then he made the choice. Like, you know what? I worked my entire life to get to this point, so I kind of want to enjoy it. So, okay. And so it kind of tempers his expectations. I would find those kind of strategic things would be awesome from a legal perspective for guys.
Yeah, that's again though, it's individually tailored, and that's why I always recommend if you have any questions, get $250 together and buy an hour or two of a lawyer's time, and he might even say, keep your money, I'll consult with you for free. But the major issue there when it comes to getting your questions answered is cutting through your own bullshit. You really need to simply say to yourself, what is the outcome that I want from this, regardless of how unreasonable, and who is going to get me from point A to point B. The major problem that I see with guys, particularly in divorce and their life in general, we'll be talking about this more, is that they lack assertiveness. They don't tell people what they want or what they need. And in turn, they end up compromising on things that if they may have asked, they wouldn't have needed to compromise to begin with. And, you want to talk about somebody who's just hanging out around the edges and letting life happen to them. Well, I mean, what's more of an important thing than how often you want to see your kids and how much of your income leaves your bank every month for some person that you no longer enjoy spending time with? I mean, get your shit together, man. I mean, ask the hard questions to somebody who is there being paid to listen to you, and get it done. Don't sit back and say, I'm going to be the kinder person in this and make this amicable. I mean, what's amicability other than being a pushover in a circumstance where you need to be your biggest advocate?
I like how you put that. That's good.
I mean,
and you know what is? Oh, here's something too. So I actually have not a lot of legal experience, but through the military system, through summary trials and court martials and that, on the side of usually the person being accused. And it's funny, it's not even a married guy, it's just guys, because every time we had to charge one of the guys, and they'll be like 21, 22-year-old kids, they get drunk and do something stupid. Or one case, it even got so bad that the guy got blackout because somebody roofied his drink. There was a while there where a bunch of military guys were getting roofied by somebody outside in the city. And he tried to stab a cab driver for some reason with like a comb or something. But they always say the same thing, like they just want it to end. And it was the most slam dunk way to handle these things without too much legal intervention from the MPs and that. They would just say, I want this to end. So you would say, okay, like I'm on your side. We got this. Just, take your licks, do your time. They'll confess. Then the summary trial ends up being 15 minutes because once you got the confession, you're done. Then they go through their punishment and they come back and you accept them wholeheartedly. Or a lot of the time what would happen is then you'd have to do release proceedings. And I saw it a bunch of times with one of my students is another Frenchie. But then I realized, had he kept his mouth shut, because the military didn't have anything and they're not particularly good at investigations, especially for piddly crap. Like I think his was, he was at a party where a bunch of people were smoking weed. And I didn't think he smoked any. nobody else thought he smoked any until he admitted it. Nobody knew. And had he just kept his mouth shut and stopped worrying about the discomfort of being accused of things, he probably would still be in the military today. And he was even good. Like, even our CO vouched for him, saying we got to keep this guy in, but eventually policy booted him. And I think it's that there's something underlying a guy's mentality, because they all, even divorce, military, whatever, they all seem to have that same approach of just removing discomfort by rolling over and playing dead.
Yeah, and a lot of times, the desire to have something come to a conclusion outweighs a person's desire to be their own best advocate. And once you've reached that point, I'm not really sure what to say to somebody, because if you're in a position where you essentially concede your frame. I mean, guys want to talk about frame all the time in this space, but I mean, the fact is that if you are conceding your portions of your income and portions of your time spent with your child in order to simply be amicable, you've lost all frame. I don't care what anybody says. There's only two situations that I can think of where you've completely lost frame. This is one of them, and the other is lashing out in violence at someone who's rejected you. Those are the two. Those are the two times that I believe that of total frame loss.
Ooh, that's really good.
And either resorting to violence or resorting to acceptance of the worst possible outcome. That's complete frame loss right there. And well, you got to keep the frame in order to keep your relationship. Yeah, that's true. You also have to keep frame in order to keep yourself. And the self-preservation aspect of it, and the things that you want to do after the relationship is over, is highly dependent upon how you take your divorced frame forward. And nice thing about the married red pill was that we had a few guys in there who were writing about it, who had some pretty good tales of how they progressed from being the defeated dad to the divorced Chad, and that worked out for a lot of them. Two Guns was one of the guys that I think wrote a very good exposition on what his life was like post divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Ex addict bro,
dude, he's my favorite. I know he's polarizing, but he's my favorite.
Yeah, for various reasons, ex addict bro has written some things that are both highly controversial.
You had to hold your nose on that one too, didn't you?
Well, but I only did with him because he was very evangelical about his situation after he got himself clean and after he removed himself from a codependent wife. But that is neither here nor there. I can't dislike the message because I don't like the messenger. You know how that is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's par for the course. But yeah, I remember that, and I liked it too because he still made mistakes too. Because I remember that one story he had where he was in I can't remember, some like quarry or something with his kids, and he left his kids alone for a bit, and then some guy was pissing him off, and he kind of realized he was going into those same mental models where he was going to fight a guy in front of his infant child, and then he kind of caught himself and realized, like, what the fuck am I doing? And he eventually steered right, so it was kind of nice. I like that because he was willing to still make mistakes, learn from mistakes, and kind of do it on the fly as opposed to afterwards when it's too late to do anything about it. And I don't think you can really ask much more of a guy than to be willing to fail and then learn from it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, men have kind of perfected the post hoc rationalization of why I did something 45 days after it happened. The when it comes to sports, you have the Monday morning quarterback that, hey, football, why didn't you play better football? The Monday after the game on Sunday. But when it comes to relationships, a lot of times it'll be 6 months later when they realize that, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have punched a hole in the wall in front of my wife and kids when I was frustrated, and that may have had something to do with the fact that I only get to see them, once a month, with somebody from the state having to be there and supervise my visits.
It seems so obvious when you put it that way.
Yeah, but the problem is in the moment, a lot of times guys are as emotional, or if not more emotional than the women they're arguing with. And we always talk about being rational men. There's a lot of irrational actions taken by these guys in the moment because they haven't hardened themselves to look at things that shouldn't be overwhelming dispassionately. And
Yeah, hardened to self-reflection.
well, I mean, if you're in a situation where, we're getting back to the map and we're getting back to mental models on, what you do as a guy who's not getting the sex that he wants out of his relationship, the easiest way to start imparting passive dread is to treat your relationship as though you are already divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then from there, improving yourself in obvious physical ways in order to induce passive dread. I don't like using the word, but I mean that's really the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
You get better looking, you start making more money, you're more socially acceptable to other people. She sees these changes in you and she either wants to hop on board the train or she doesn't. um, and
Which,
you can't just sit back and allow things to happen, obviously, but at the same time, it's not worth it at a certain point to simply sit there and spin your wheels the same way, get frustrated because nobody is either communicating it or you're not communicating it by your actions that you're trying to make changes. And then lash out at people because don't you understand what I'm going through? Well, no, I don't. I mean, you're not talking to anybody. You're simply sinking into yourself, and I'm
mad that people can't read minds.
right. People can't read minds. Exactly. We always gripe as men that, we can't read the minds of women. Well, they can't read ours either. You know,
Yeah.
and at some point in time, you're going to have to use your mouth sounds to convey to convey to women, what it is that you want. It might not be when you want it, but you still need to do it.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too, because it's funny you mentioned how you hate saying, how did you put it with dread? What was the
Yeah,
word you used?
yeah. I mean, passive dread, essentially. I mean, but it is the best way to say it. People like to
Oh,
turn.
induced dread. That was how you said it.
Yeah,
But right, because people get really confused because when you say induced dread, it kind of sounds like a covert contract where I'll do dread and then she will desire me. And you're right, where that's kind of, there's no way to explain it other than make it sound like a covert contract, but it's not. It's like you said, you've already checked out of the marriage or the relationship. What would you do if you were single? Well, go do that. And I often joke that it's kind of stealing female tools for male sensibilities.
yes.
Because how common is that divorce story where a guy's sitting at home and the girl and him are having problems? All of a sudden, she starts working out, being fit, being more social, buying nice clothes, and the guy thinks he's hit the jackpot. Meanwhile, it's because she's getting ready to move on. 6 months later, she drops some papers on him and goes and moves in with Chad next door, which is essentially what we're doing there, which is why it has that effect, because as a girl, that's what she would do in that situation. And I
Yes.
guess technically it is what you are doing, but I like it. You saying you have the olive branch that if she starts acting right and being valuable to you, then you're always open to the idea.
Yeah. I mean, like we've always said, the wife gets first shot, and yeah, and I mean it's pretty obvious, but a lot of guys don't really understand that. And what I mean by a wife gets first shot is, once you've put in the time, made the improvements, started making the money that you want to make, look the way you want to look, improve your style the way that you want to, get some of the possessions that you want, have the hobbies you want, have a group of guy friends, have a place to go that doesn't include your spouse or your kids, have your kids put on the right path. You notice that my list is incredibly long because this is work, man. This isn't something that you're going to magically just fall into because you got your teeth whitened one day. This is, a process. And if the harder you've fallen or um, the less time that you've taken to for self care during this time period, you've probably fallen even farther than what you realize. So I mean,
Yeah.
if you think you're a 5 to your spouse, you're probably closer to a 3. And you need to put the time in and put yourself in a position to be attractive to everybody out there, not just your wife or whatever woman happens to be in your life who you want to stick your dick in. This
I would
is
say it's especially important to be attractive to people outside of your relationship. I think that's more important than being attractive inside of it.
Well, you're looking at it from the perspective of somebody who's trying to help people. I'm looking at
Uh,
the perspective of somebody who's on the receiving end of the help.
Good point. Good point.
They want that lifeline. They want to put themselves in a place where I can get immediate feedback and an immediate reaction, so I can get on this positive feedback train from somebody outside of myself, and it will give me more motivation. Well, sometimes you're not going to get that motivation from anybody but yourself, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. And that's one of the reasons why it's good to have guy friends. It's good to go to the gym. It's good to talk to that barista when you're getting your uh, cappuccino in the morning. It's good to talk to anybody
Even
because
on day one, it's good to get angry. I found that, yeah,
yes,
that you're right. At the first couple months, you're not going to get any feedback from anybody. In fact, you're probably going to get negative feedback. And so for most guys, me included, just getting pissed off and using that to fuel you is kind of the only way you have to get going.
yeah, the anger phase a lot of times is looked at negatively in this space because you see the nihilistic portions of it, or people who like to stew in it, or feel as though that they're better because of recognizing it, and they use it as part of their identity.
Mm-hmm.
I view the anger phase as just that, a phase. You need to use it as motivational fuel to basically look at everybody around you who isn't giving you what you want out of your life, the big fuck you, and put things into action that will put yourself in a higher stead, with everybody that you have interactions with. I mean, if you're at work and you're passed over for promotions, if your wife's not sleeping with you, if your kids won't respect you when you ask for things, um, you know, that's a reflection of your impotence in your relationships at this point. Now, I'm not talking just sexual impotence. I'm talking about just your lack of power that you have, that's perceived between yourself and the people around you in your day to day life. I mean,
Yeah, it's funny you put it that way because, like, most of the time it is because a guy's being a schlub and people just respond to that. But there are the occasions where the other people are truly crappy people and they're just always going to be like that. But then at the same time, by taking an ownership perspective, like, you let them in here. There's always, if you go back far enough, there's always some point where you made a decision that brought this all into yourself.
yeah, I mean, there are a lot
So
of guys.
yeah, even if they are crap, you can't, it doesn't matter.
Right?
You
No,
let,
no.
why are they there then?
Right, right. Well, there are a lot of guys too. We've seen it before where they say, "Oh, I've now that I've swallowed the pill, I'm 6 months in. Boy, I realized that advice given to me by my best man 3 months after I got engaged was right. He said, don't marry this stupid bitch, and maybe I should have listened 14 years ago before I had three disrespectful kids with this whore." I mean, but that is again, that post hoc rationalization of, I shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Yeah.
but I didn't understand at the time, and now, I really need all of this fixed in a hurry because, my decade of fuck ups needs to be, corrected as quickly as possible so I can go on living my life and not feel as though I want to, put a gun to my head. And
Yeah, and those guys that go too fast, they just kick the can down the road. I was thinking of the I Am Steve McQueen guy on that one.
oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, he did that. He essentially, a couple months in, he realized that his wife was dead weight, so he ditched her. And how long was it till he got that new girl?
Oh, 6 weeks maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
6 weeks. And then he started field reports immediately. Like the exact same problems his wife had, this same one started having right away.
Yeah, and well, I was angry at him, and I basically called him a serial monogamist, and that he had no clue of what he was doing, that he needed to start over from square one on himself, that he needed to, reread the entire sidebar, learn to respect himself, learn that women aren't going to be the end all be all of his existence. I mean, he basically wasted 2.5 years of everybody's time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he was the ultimate value leech. Horrible, horrible example of how you can take information, try to apply it to your life, and then just completely gloss over the real meaning of what it is that you need to do while trying to band-aid all of the problems with yourself and essentially fake it. And that's
Yeah.
what he did.
Kick the
He
can down the road, make the same mistakes again. Although I will ask you this. Do you think he would be the worst example or that alpha as wolf guy? And I'll tell the audience what it is after I hear your answer.
You know what? I actually think that Steve's a worse example,
Oh.
and let me explain why. Alpha as wolf is the I guess it's not a kind way to say it, but he is the socially autistic person who tries to apply what should be nuanced information in a binary fashion. Okay. I think that there is probably something organically wrong with him that forces him to look at life that way. Steve McQueen, on the other hand, he tried to bend the rules and LARP and fake just enough to get people around him to start to accept the quote unquote new him.
Mm-hmm.
And, he had enough awareness to get rid of a person in his life who he was unhappy with, but he never made enough changes to himself to where he wasn't attracting the exact same type of people. One person, I think, with enough therapy can change their personality to become more attractive and has that attractiveness for the right reasons. The other person, that's just who he is, and he's deluding himself, deluding others around him, and he's always going to be the permanent victim, blaming other people for his perpetual screw ups. And that's why I think that the person who knowingly half-asses something versus the person who doesn't have the firmware to understand the programming that's being offered is the worst person.
Ah, fair enough. All right. Well, I guess, and for the audience, you guys don't know who Alpha is Wolf are. This is a guy from a few years back. And when he was first doing his map, he was just applying everything. And I remember this is like ties back to Jack 10 of Hearts. I remember this is probably my favorite post of his ever. The guy was giving a field report about how he was trying to have sex with his wife and his hands were cold. And so she complained about it. And he took that as a disrespect test or something like that. And then he started to get really weird about it to the point where the girl just threw out, like, she was basically accusing him of going down that road of abuse. And to read the whole thing, it was just awkward as hell. And eventually, I think Wine More Please booted him from the forum saying, look, man, you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. I don't think you're ready for this place. And then Jack's comment was, it was like a guy learning to drive a car. And then he sits in the car, flicks the locks on and off, rolls down the window, starts the wipers, turns on the lights, turns off the lights, and then wonders why he's not driving to where he wanted to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, just no nuance, just apply.
Yeah.
You said do X, I'll do X. You said do Y, I'll do Y. Never mind that half the advice contradicts the other half of the advice because they're all situational. So yeah, that's the thing. And it was like a running gag for the longest time that anybody who had a canine reference in their name was most likely going to be a complete then fuck on this thing.
Well, I think we were like 7 of 8 after that, as far as accuracy too. But we've got one guy in the group now who RP Wolf, who appears to be getting it, and he just needs to make sure that he doesn't shrink himself down smaller than he actually is. And this is a guy who has all of the the physical and mental tools to make it happen if he doesn't, like you say, step on his own dick. He's the total package in the making, and he can pull it off very easily, just so long as he just doesn't do something catastrophic to fuck it up, because
yeah.
he's a good dude. He's got the right mindset now. He just needs to kind of get out of his own way.
That's good. Hey, is the Lit still around, by the way? I haven't had a chance to follow as much in there as I'd like to.
I haven't seen Litz in quite a while. I mean, he'll pop in occasionally. He's kind of like you know, Sorcerer King and some of the other old guys who will just stop in every once in a while if it's an old topic that's being kind of bastardized or is misunderstood. They'll throw in their 2 cents. You know,
oh, that's awesome to see him as like the old Yoda now. I remember back when he first started.
Yeah,
he was my favorite because all he did, he just treated it like work. That's it. No ego, no nothing. He just started going through the steps and building slow but sure.
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah, I mean, there's a few of us. I mean, I'm kind of guilty of this now too, where I'm not in the day to day anymore, only because you know, I go by more to read the titles of the topics, and if it interests me, I'll get into it, and if it seems to be off track, I'll simply go into correct, and that's kind of where I'm at now. I don't take particular interest in 1 or 2 or 3 or more people, only because, you know, I don't really have the time for it currently, and secondly, you know, there are 20, damn near 25, 26,000 members there now. If there aren't new people stepping up, you know, after 3-4 years, that just means there's a ton of value leeches in that space, and I'm not really sure what that means, good or bad.
Yeah, no, I agree on that one. So we normally just go to the hour. I was going to keep this going as long as you were comfortable with. Carl and I usually head on for another 30 minutes. At this point, it's going to be just free form, whatever we wanted to shoot the shit about. Since I've only actually chatted to you once before, and we've known each other for years. So I don't want to waste this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, if there's, you know, any questions anybody in the chat might have, you know, we maybe address those a tiny bit. But I mean, my big thing has always been the assertiveness point. I think a lot of guys now are simply accepting of what it is that people will give them, as opposed to asking for things or simply taking them if they can. Society now is kind of, you know, branded the person who has a certain degree of assertiveness as, you know, oh, he's a sociopath, or he's got issues with being, you know, a narcissist. Well, I'm of the school that a certain amount of individual narcissism can be healthy.
Yeah, same. People treat narcissism as if it was narcissistic personality disorder, and they're not diseases anyway. They're just diagnosis.
Right.
All that doctors did is they took the chunk of population, they drew a bell curve around behaviors, and then after 2 or 3 standard deviations from the norm, they consider these guys are so far away from normal societal behavior that they're unable to contribute successfully. So it's not even a disease. It's just you've got it amped up to 10 when maybe an 8 would be more in line.
Yeah, and you know, there's a certain degree of people who have become so selfless in their own mind that they've gone the way of feeling deserving for having sacrificed. And I think that once you adopt a semi-narcissistic mindset, you get away from that, you know, Christ complex type of thing where you're willing to go to an inn and be put up for the night, literally or figuratively.
I almost think of them though as narcissists as well, because if you think of like they have that same narcissistic narrative, but instead of being the king of their own story, they think of themselves as the martyr. They want to be Gandhi instead of you know, King Solomon or whatever reference you want to use.
Yeah, you know, and that's a good point. I mean, you can be the focal point of a tragedy, a comedy, or a drama. And you know, myself, you don't want to be played the fool. You also don't want to be the person dead at the end of the story. So, I mean, what do you want to choose?
It's always the question at the end of the day. What do you want, right?
Yeah, it's always the question, and a lot of times guys can't answer that for the life of them. They might make it situational. They might make their answer esoteric. You know, well, who doesn't want to be happy? Well, no shit. I mean, but that doesn't answer the question of what do you want individually and what do you think you need to do in the interim in order to put yourself on a path to happiness.
Yeah, ditch the container word. Describe what's inside.
No, and the thing is that I can choose whatever emotion I want to have based on a circumstance if I'm prepared for what the outcome might be. But if you don't have any idea what you want, you are immediately placed in a reactive position instead of a proactive position. It's kind of like the eternal procrastinator. You have a deadline for something. It's sitting there the whole time. You could have done whatever it is that you needed to do, 3 weeks ago, as opposed to, waiting until the last second and telling people that, you work best under pressure. Horseshit. You don't work best under pressure. You just decided not to do it for a period of time because you thought that, playing Fortnite was a better use of your time than doing whatever it was that you needed to do. And now,
Dudes, yeah, speaking of when you talked about the curse of being smart, I think that's one of like the key points to it.
it is the fact that somebody a lot of times can produce quality work comparatively to everybody else simply because they have the mental capacity to do it quickly and to do it accurately is different from doing your best. What is what is your best? Well, I don't even know because I've been using other people's metrics of what is good this entire time, and I can do good enough by completing whatever it was that I needed to complete the night before.
Yeah.
I see these guys in school all the time. I mean, it was.
I was that guy in school.
Yeah, I mean, you party until Friday night. You recover from your hangover Saturday afternoon. You have a 40-page term paper due at 2 p.m. in the afternoon on Monday, but somehow you get it in, you got it done, you got it in, you got an A or an A minus on it, and you still have a hangover, but everybody else says you're doing everything you need to do in order to be your best because your metrics of what is good and bad grade wise are measured against every other idiot out there. And that's that you shouldn't be using the rest of the world as your measuring stick. I mean, if you truly believe yourself to be, superior in some way, then you should be using your own performance and whether or not you're getting better as the way to measure your success as compared to, the guy who barely made it through high school. I mean, George Carlin has a funny but very pithy line about people. He basically said, the average person is stupid. Can you imagine the other 50% of people behind him?
Yeah, at least half. The average
yeah.
man is an idiot, and at least half the people around are stupider than him. Yeah, I remember that one. That was good.
Yes, and it's exactly true. I mean, you have people who exist in the tails, and unfortunately or fortunately, men have a tendency to exist in the tails more, whether it's emotionally, intellectually, ability to earn, aggressiveness, agreeableness,
attractiveness, anything.
That's right. We kind of screw up the bell curve a little bit. Our curve is a little flatter, and it goes out towards the ends a little bit more. And those types of differences a lot of times is what confuses men when it comes to women as well, because I mean they center around the center and for everything, and but one way or another, you need to basically make the decision that I'm going to be my own mental point of origin. I'm going to be the person who makes the decisions for me as to what it is that I want to do. And even in the context of a family, you have a wife and kids to consider. That's what you are doing. You are considering. You are not deferring. And I think the issue here is that many people simply get into a deferring mode. They turn into the Instagram dad who takes pictures of all of their kids and their wife and all of their activities, holds the cell phone and is never really a part of the life that he's building, or at least it never seems so because he's never seen and he's never heard.
Kind of reminds me of being an enabler for a drug addict.
To a certain extent, but I think in this case it's kind of worse from the perspective that what the problem is if the other person is taking drugs. If you're simply putting yourself in a deferential position with everybody in your life, you would be the perpetual enabler. I mean, you would be there at the party handing out free weed, and people might not even want it. That's the major difference there. I don't see the point of being the person who always has to bring the fun at the expense of themselves. I mean, you need to be able to enjoy yourself, and sometimes that's going to be doing things that other people don't want. Too bad.
Well, so I was thinking too, because I know I try to stay out of talks about dads doing parenting stuff because I don't think I have a lot to offer from that. And even if I'm right, it's missing that certain ethos with it. But from a kid's perspective, like I obviously, and I know it's kind of be kind of funny talking to you about this, but I had a bit of a rough childhood growing up, and obviously yours is a bit a bit rougher. Which I'm not trying to say like who wins this one, but like I turned out fine, you turned out fine.
Well,
So
I mean, to be honest, Ryan, I think that your roughness of your childhood was more protracted than mine was. You got to experience roughness of childhood at various stages of development and got to see men and women act horribly to one another at different stages of consciousness when it came to, you know, what it was that you saw, when it was, who it was with, what were the reasons behind people behaving the way they did. Why is it confusing that, you know, my mother hates my stepfather for being nice to her, but wants to hang out with losers because she's viscerally attracted to them? I mean, that's things that I never had to really deal with. I had to deal with, you know, early abandonment issues and you know, being in the system and things like that. But that's, you know, that ended by the time, you know, I was in puberty. You know, yours was a little more extended, and the lessons learned that you learned were much more, I guess, you know, red pilling than than mine were. Mine were more, you know, why the heck have I been passed off to this group of people who are, you know, raising me with 15 other kids that I don't know, and my parents have just kind of gone off to wherever. And then, you know, why am I being seized and taken away from all of my, you know, brothers and sisters and being put in this home, you know, to I'm with a stable family and they provided everything I needed, and I got out of it what I needed to, and I, you know, have been fine since. But
yeah, but that's what I was thinking on this too. So like you've turned out fine, I've turned out fine, and it's very off-putting when I see a guy who's worried because he didn't tuck his kids in bed every night and kiss them on the forehead, that somehow the daughters are going to be in stripper shoes and the son is going to be a drug addict. I just find it's almost belittling. You know how a lot of the traditional conservative guys like treating women as if they have no agency or any ability to act right, I guess, lack of a better word there, but they think their kids are completely fragile. And I don't think they understand how resilient kids are. Like,
yeah,
first off, they don't have the framework. To them, yeah, normal is what normal is. They don't know what you think normal is. Whatever they experience, they just assume that's normal and work with it.
True. You know, let me address, you know, the I guess the 800-pound gorilla in the room before you even get to the issue of what is a family's normal. For some reason in this space, men can simultaneously believe that women have no agency and that they are also the destroyer of worlds. You know, you need to take a second with that and think about why that is. Okay, you know, not every woman is Bauduca, you know, or is she also the, you know, oldest teenager in the house who can't make any, you know, reasonable decisions for anyone, including herself? Neither one of those things can obviously be true. So, you know, just stop it. Okay. There's no reason to think this. And when it comes to, you know, normal in a family, I mean, I grew up in the, you know, the 80s and the early 90s. I mean, all of my formative childhood years were spent, you know, either playing someplace until the streetlights came on and being told to come in and not take candy from white vans, to what we have today with people essentially hovering over their kids constantly, hoping that nothing catastrophic happens to them.
Oh yeah, because pedophiles are behind every single bush.
They are, and
never mind that Uncle Touchy is the biggest threat anyway, and it's so rare it almost never happens.
Right. No, the biggest issue here is that we have, people who have decided to parent based on a perfection model versus a good enough model, and I am a firm believer that perfection often gets in the way of good enough, particularly when it comes to people acting and getting things done for others or themselves. If you sit around and you think about all the ways that you can do things perfectly, and then you finally don't have the time or the energy to enact any of those strategies, all you've done is essentially jerk off in your cerebellum the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's not worth it. And it's the same thing with parenting. It's a lot of it's on the fly. I mean, your kids are going to screw up and do dumb things that you've never anticipated simply because they're just kids and they're going to do that. And you have to deal with it responsibly and responsibly, and make sure that they learn something from it without being cruel. I mean, what I find a lot of times with parenting advice, it vacillates from being either incredibly permissive or being downright mean. And there's a happy medium in there where a person needs to enforce boundaries. Here we go again. I mean, this has everything to do with yourself and how you deal with everybody, not just your kids or with your wife or whatever. I mean, you have to basically say some behaviors are completely unacceptable to me, regardless of who you are. I mean, I'm not going to tell my son, if you talk back to me again, I'm going to punch you in the face, because that's what I would do to somebody in the street if you told me what you just told me. No, I'm not going to say it that way. Okay. But, you can feel that way in the moment. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. When somebody tells you out of frustration or anger that they hate you, kids will do that after a while. I mean, I've got a 12-year-old daughter. I mean, I think she hates everybody 45.
Oh, your next year is going to suck once they turn 13.
Yeah. I mean, we've got plenty of kids out there that she can, bounce all this stuff off from. I mean, the public schools are enough to teach somebody to hate anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And it's funny because I was thinking of, here's another name from way back, True Datness. Do you remember him?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So, and it's something else I found, that guys seem to have a much easier time to detach their emotional investment from their wives than they do from their kids. A lot of guys, their kid is the ultimate one-itis that they can't really shed. And I remember because he was essentially becoming an orbiter, or like a let's just be friends conversation with his daughter, where he was trying to bribe her affections with like, I'll buy you a car, but you have to come spend some time with me and stuff like that. And she was having none of it. So like the same way you would completely screw up a relationship is he was doing that same one with his daughter. And to the point where a lot of the guys called him out on that. And I know it sounds creepy to describe it in this way, but you kind of have to treat, or at least that was the consensus, that you treat your daughter the same way you would treat your wife.
In that one
certain in a boundary enforcement way.
Yeah. In a boundary, yeah, but from a boundary enforcement perspective, you treat everybody in your life as you would if it's something that's completely unacceptable or immoral or whatever creates your boundaries. You just basically say, that's not for me. I'm not going to accept that. It can be.
Yeah, and he ultimately didn't. He got so bad at that, he just started like shouting in mod mail for probably a good month. He was sending vacation pictures saying, "You guys wish you had my life," and I was kind of laughing at that. But I mean, yeah, he just really couldn't let go. And I think, like I always flippantly say, you got to hate him just a little bit, but like it's kind of where I'm going with that, is you can't be so invested that you treat them like the woman of Willendorf, that fertility goddess statue that they had from the Neolithic times.
Sure. Yeah. Always pregnant with perky boobs. That's the way everybody saw women at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, the major issue there, I think, than anything, is you also have to realize that most of the relationship that you're going to have with your kids is as adults, and that you're preparing them to be good people, not just compliant little people when it comes to your relationship with them.
Or to have
And
them like you, even, I would say.
well, I mean, I wrote a pretty big letter, kind of a faux expose to my son in one of the Reddit forums, and it was basically called "I'm not your friend. You'll thank me later." And and basically it describes what I'm trying to do for him to prepare him, what it is that I think that he needs versus what he might want from a relationship with me. That down the line, you'll come to accept more of what I imparted than you might immediately, and that your mother might be outwardly kinder to you than me because it's simply not the role that I think that you need from me. And we're trying to make some of us are trying to make anti-fragile winners in this world, not just people that can be compliant and plastic,
Passive.
plastic and passive around the house. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to crush anybody's will, but at the same time, I can't, praise, my son who is, objectively very talented for mediocrity. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Just to simply say, I love you for who you are. Yes, I get that. You are my son. I will always love you, but I will not always like and appreciate everything that you do simply because it comes from you. And that is a hard lesson for a lot of men and women to learn once they start parenting, is that you need to see your kids as developing people, and not necessarily just your issue. And
Or projected, those living vicariously through them, having them as projections of yourself.
yeah, that one's difficult for a lot of involved parents too. They're of the mindset they need somebody to complete their legacy. Man, I scored 4 touchdowns in one game
Okay.
and now that you're on the team, son, I need you to get to college so you can live the athlete life that I didn't get to, when I was at Polk High. So
Yeah, reminds me of when Rolo was talking about how the tradcons, they don't want good relationship. They want a time machine. They don't want to solve problems. It kind of seems the same way, as if they're going back in time, pretending that they're that child. And then, what did I want back then? So I'm going to give it to him. Meanwhile, the kid's in a totally different place. He's not the same person. And it's very obvious to a child that you're trying to manipulate them that way. And it tends to have the opposite effect, at least from what I've seen. All the people that I've known growing up that had those kind of overbearing helicopter parents had a very poor sense of self. And they almost always ended up deferring to the first woman that ended up touching their dicks.
yes,
Which sucked in the military, because Dependopotamus, they're savages, man. They smell that a mile away.
So you joined the Eagle Scouts when you were 17, and you were a high school athlete before that, and your dad was in the military too, and now you've decided to join. Wow, I find you riveting and thoroughly attractive, sir. Can I move in with you? that, that's the type of person who is just sitting there waiting to get got. And
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you were a promise keeper, and you pledged purity all through high school. Man, I'm going to give you some blowjobs that are going to change your mind about everything.
Oh, and some of those girls even flaunt it. It's almost like having barbs on a fishhook, because
Yeah.
it was almost like a meme at one point. They would hook up, be great sex. She'd always be a virgin until you met one of the other guys from the base that she had sex with, and it's like, oh, well, it was just him. One of my coworkers actually almost slept with his fiance during their stag, my first month on board, and that's how I got to be known as like the coolest guy on board there. It's a brand new sailor, so it was awesome, but sucked for him. She was a virgin, and then he met 3 other guys who had sex with her, and she's like, yeah, but those are the only 3, and he kind of bought that. And without a doubt, as soon as he gets it, it's initially like really good sex, then some sexual deviant stuff, like she liked to play around, but the other couples would never let him in, so we had to take pictures, but he liked feeling involved. This is an extreme example, so bear with me. Then as soon as she knew she could push those boundaries and he wouldn't push back, married quick, started having him buy her parents stuff, gained weight, popped out a couple kids. It was literally like, okay, I got him now. And then just boom, gain weight, throw some kids out, like hook them as fast and as hard as I can. It's almost like it was purposeful. And I know it was kind of just running off of hardware and instinct, but yeah.
Well, I mean, and it was even harder and even faster. I mean, I was graduating high school right around, the first Desert Storm time.
Right.
And, so we had kids, we had guys who were already committed to going into the military, as juniors and seniors in high school. And there was a good chance after those conflicts started up that they were going to be deployed. And, when the deployments start happening, boy, that lockdown process, I mean, you might as well multiply that by 3 or 4 as far as the speed and the intensity that these guys and girls ramp up in these relationships where, there's a chance that she might get a lifetime pension out of you kicking the bucket. I mean, there's
yeah, it's predatory as hell. It's scary.
Oh yeah, it's bad. I mean, it is bad, and sometimes it's the girl at home, the senior in high school has got nothing going on with her, or it is some guy or some girl, at the base just prior to deployment who's just waiting for somebody to fill that role. And
the shack rats.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, horrible creatures. They can find the smallest hole to sneak in there. It's infestation.
Yeah. Yeah. But the the high school girlfriend, who that if without some type of support from something stable over time, she's going to be the greeter at Walmart or something. Somebody who's not going to do much to take care of herself or to support herself. That girl ends up marrying that guy at 18, 19 years old, and then he gets off to be cannon fodder in some desert someplace. And some of those women are still living off military pensions to this day, and they were married for 18 months.
Jeez, that's all it takes over there?
Oh yeah, it doesn't take very long at all. I mean, if you die in action, I mean, it's yeah.
Damn. Well, at least we had some protections over here, because technically, if you don't know Canada, a lot of guys just weren't getting married anymore because watching the boomers go through their horrible divorces, the kids just essentially it's like, it's not worth it. And so what the government had done is they switched it. So if you're cohabitating with a girl for 6 months, we're automatically going to assume, and that's where common law status came in. The problem with that came when the military had 7-month deployments. So a girl would move in, you'd deploy the next week, and then you'd come back married and usually divorced. And it was always like a meme where a guy would come home with the fridge empty, the kids gone, and the furniture nowhere, with like ketchup and a big FU written across the wall. So they eventually got it expanded to 12 months. And I think now it's up to 24 months just across the board for everybody. But yeah, just to avoid that thing, 'cause it was really bad, especially when you get to those smaller town bases like Petawawa, or really bad with the army bases. I only know Halifax and Esquimalt there, but yeah, and it's like I get it. Girls clearly saw it as a means of support. And if guys were stupid about it too, they would update their wills right away. Like normally what you're suggested to do, and you used to have to get permission from your CO to marry, and they got rid of that because COs were telling too many guys no. No, you're not getting married. You'll thank me later. But so they at least added some protections at the end where you'd have to update your will. They're like, all right, wait a year after your marriage. So then at least then if you're divorced within that first year, it would most likely go to your next of kin, which would be your parents or your brother or something like that. And then the wife wouldn't have such an incentive to immediately grab you before deployment. Never really worked though, because guys are like, no, she's different. I love her. It's fine. All right, then.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the exact opposite here in the States, because we started an income tax system kind of early in the 20th century. And in doing so, in order to incentivize marriage, we put things in the tax code that have always been advantageous for married couples. So for a long time, the states already had common law marriages, so that all of these people were getting tax advantages simply by declaring their common law marriage. Well, all of the states then, at the urging of the federal government here in the U.S., they banned common law marriages
Oh,
for
is that why they did it? For tax
for,
reasons?
for,
Because
for the for the majority of the states. So like and like using Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois as an example, I think they were abandoned in uh, 57, 61, and like 62. They wrote common law marriage completely out of the existence. Passed
that's
laws.
funny. Yeah, I always thought it was like everybody always gave that meme, and it's because I probably watched too much news at the time. Where it's because they didn't want the gays to hook up, so that's why they got rid of it.
No.
But it makes much more sense that it would be like a tax purpose.
Yeah, it has everything to do with revenue. When you get right down to it, there's always a money reason for things. There's really never a morality reason. That's just bread and circuses when it comes to the reasons why people think laws are made. And and when it comes to things like common law marriage and the Duluth model and things like that, those are all they were put in for revenue reasons. They didn't really care about the best interest of the child or you know what it is that a man needs to pay a woman in order to make her whole with support. It's none of that stuff. It's having a mechanism to collect and an ability to imprison the person who is supposed to be the source of the money.
Which
That
is so weird because debtors' prisons, I thought we got rid of those in the Magna Carta.
we did, and the U.S. technically doesn't have debtors' prisons either, but they do have the ability to be imprisoned for contempt of court. So if you are in contempt of a court order, meaning that you're not following it, or you're not paying your support if it's in writing and signed by a judge,
Yeah. I
then you
can't push buttons on the Sabbath, so this thing will automatically push the button for me. Seems a little weaselly. Like it's missing the spirit of the law and adhering to the letter of it.
well, but it's consistent with all of the other laws and all of the other law enforcement of law. So I mean, if I have an order and I simply don't follow it, and it's signed by the judge, whether it's for not putting sand in the middle of a swamp and filling in a wetland versus not paying my support versus not staying away from the person that I used to beat the hell out of, it it all means the same thing. You're essentially just violating a court order, and that there's a certain penalty that can be attached to that based on whatever place you happen to live. It's a very legalistic and mechanical application of the law, but in some cases, it's the most fair way to do it. Unfortunately.
Fair enough. Because I always thought it was different in the sense that now I don't know how much of this is the Canadian in me, but where the government or the organization imposes a hardship, they have to provide a means to to deal with that. So, for example, let's take that example: the filling up a marshland or destroying environmental territory. Yeah, they could put you in prison for a contempt of a legal order not to do that, but that doesn't prevent you from not prevents you from not doing that in the future. Where I would find a putting person in jail for contempt for child support payments, then the government puts a hardship upon you where you're no longer able to meet that legal standard. And I'm really fudging up the things here because I only did the LSAT once and I think I scored like a 150, so I'm not legal at all.
No,
But
what you're describing is actually a good point. There's also the issue of imprisonment for minor offenses because you can't afford the fine portion of the sentence. So, like in
yeah,
a lot of places, a misdemeanor is 90 days in jail or a $250 fine, let's say.
right.
So if you can pay the fine, you don't go to jail. But if you're so broke as to want to steal from your convenience store in order to eat, obviously, when you got caught for that petty crime, you're not going to be able to afford to even eat. You're not going to be able to afford the fine. So what do you do instead of accepting the fine? You
Yeah,
go
and
to
that's what community service was invented for, was it not?
yeah. But the problem with community service now is that that's been turned into a um, rich kids get expunged program a lot of times rather than a way to avoid imprisoning broke brown people. Um,
Ah,
that's a different different topic for a different day.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess we're over time now. I only asked you for 60 minutes and you gave me 90, so I super appreciate it.
Hey, not a
I'll
problem.
probably let it go now so we can grab some breakfast and get another coffee into us. And I guess Redman Group's starting up in about half hour, so I'll look forward. I'll probably be seeing you there in the chat then, or
yeah, I'll switch over to my moderator. I don't know how the hell that happened, but I'll switch over to my wrench identity and probably listen in there for at least a few minutes.
That'll be awesome. And man, we got to do this again. I love having these with you. Carl's actually choked because he was really looking forward to chatting with you too.
Well,
as far as like underrated accounts go, you're like the top of his list.
Well, I don't have anything to sell, and I'm not really pushing my brand of masculinity, so to speak. So I mean, all of my followers just simply come for essentially the jokes and any clarifications that I sometimes make to other people's stupidity. But again, my Twitter feed is simply shits and giggles, my hobby, and simply my ability to clarify points where people get completely off track, and that's about it. And I'd like to say to Carolina out there, hola Oven, how you doing, sweetie? Anyway,
obrigada.
Yeah, she's cool. The Portuguese girl in her is captivating, but yeah, we do what we need to do out in the sphere, and I choose to remain anonymous, obviously, because I have a pretty decent legal career and a family, and
yeah, dude, it's not worth it. Just from the bullshit alone, it's not worth it.
Yeah, but yeah, the major issue though with the space in general, I think at this point in time, is they just need to decide whether or not they want to spread a message that puts a positive spin on this, or if they want to make it so esoteric that only people who want to dig into continental philosophy will have any interest in it. And I think that there's a lot of good that can be done from men becoming their best, most attractive, most assertive selves, regardless of whether or not that means slaying more ass. So that's how I look at
it. Well put. I love that. Anyways, stick on for a minute here. I was just going to chat for a minute before we take off, but thanks guys for showing up. We'll catch you later. See you in about half an hour.